We're coming to a high point of consciousness that does not rely on us stuffing down emotion anymore or ignoring what has happened. It's not important that I excavate for why. Why, I believe, is a fool's game, but what is very intelligent, because when we can identify what happened, we can understand how we can integrate deeper parts of ourselves without abandoning them or rejecting them. Otherwise, if we don't, and this is the really sad part, until you make the unconscious conscious, it'll rule your life and you'll call it fate.
In a world moving faster than our minds were designed to handle, mental health is becoming one of the defining challenges of our time. Welcome to Mental Health in a Modern World with holistic health practitioner Greg Schmaus. After overcoming severe anxiety and OCD in his own life, Greg dedicated the past decade to helping others heal through a fully integrated approach to mental health, combining lifestyle coaching, psycho-emotional healing, mindfulness, and archetypal work. Over the years, he's facilitated thousands of sessions, guiding people back to peace, clarity, and a deeper connection with themselves. Each week, Greg shares powerful solo insights, conversations with leading voices in holistic healing, and immersive live coaching sessions that take you inside the healing process itself. New episodes every Friday. Follow the show and start reclaiming sovereignty over your mind in a modern world. Here's Greg.
Josh, my brother, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to have you on the show. And one of the reasons is I want to express some gratitude to you before we get started. My business wouldn't be where it is if it wasn't for you. And, back in, just giving people a little background, back in, when was it, 2020? When you and I first podcast, and then I went to seek out business mentorship and coaching, and you were the guy. And all of the things that you taught me and guided me through, how to build programs, how to podcast, how to do all the things, everything that I have business-wise now, whether it's a podcast, my programs, I owe so much to you. And so I just wanted to start by thanking you for that.
Feels so good to receive that from you, Craig. Thanks. So welcome.
And so I'd love for you to share a little bit with our listeners about your personal journey, anything you want to share about your own healing journey, because this podcast is Mental Health in a Modern World. And I know you've gone through some of your mental health challenges with addiction. So anything you want to share just about your own journey and kind of what brought you to the Josh Trent that we're seeing and hearing today.
For whatever reason, I'm having a memory when I was somewhere between 9, 10, or 11. And I watched my mom get carried out of the house on a stretcher. And I remember somatically what that felt like and how much that projected into the rest of my life. This experience as essentially a young boy who really needed to know that his environment was safe and how much that impacted his own emotional and mental health. Flash forward, it actually created an incredible business and podcast and my ability to sit here and speak with you. So encapsulated in that traumatic event was also a real gem. Yet when I think about the real understanding and or definition of mental health, I believe that the definition of mental health is a sound and clear grounded mind that is connected to the body and all the different aspects of self, such that we're integrated in a way that our mind doesn't hold us hostage, that our emotional patterns don't hold us hostage, that our unconscious beliefs as it pertains to mental health don't hold us hostage. And so my life has been layer after layer of understanding three big things. First of all, who actually am I? This discovery of self. Who am I not? Can I release and liberate myself from that which I'm not? And then third, can I give myself permission and joy to celebrate the authentic self of who Josh is? And I think that mental health is a quote crisis, if you want to call it that right now, because so many people are living out of alignment with their soul calling, their purpose, and really living someone else's story. And we can only hold the mask up for so long before our bicep starts burning. At some point, we have to take the mask off and look in the mirror at the life we created for ourselves. And so that's been my story, going back to personal training, then leaving personal training, going to corporate America, committing what I called soul suicide or spiritual suicide, doing something for just money because I didn't have the worth or self-love to trust myself to be able to lead a mission. And then catapulting into the past 11 years of podcasting on the Wellness and Wisdom podcast, which is essentially where we go to understand, like, how do we celebrate who we really are? And when we celebrate who we really are, it's such a deep question as it pertains to mental health, because a lot of the mental stories we've created about our life and even about other people and God and society as a whole are really just projections of the past. They're essentially packets of information that we've absorbed through emotional epigenetics that keep recycling and living out. But the thing that stops it, and when we become a cycle breaker, is actually the moment, much like Neo did in The Matrix, where he put his hand up and the bullets fell. It's not about fighting the past. It's not about blaming parents. It's not about pointing the finger at who created the life and the mental health that we have. It's actually about taking a deep exhale and having an emotional inventory to ask ourselves the most deep question, I believe. And that is, how can I celebrate the authentic self? How can I really know who I really am? And these are very fundamental questions as it pertains to mental health, because, you know, as Jung says, children are tasked with the unfinished business of their parents. And so that's the case for all of us, whether we know it or not. I always say that whatever is being felt in a space and not being said is still being felt. So these are some of the things that I've been leaning on, that I've been exploring in my own journey, from traumatic events in childhood, which I think most of us experience that in some way. I'm not alone in that. And then this uncovering or really remembering process of who we really are and the ability for us to celebrate who we really are. That's been the journey up until now. I'm sure it'll continue quite like that, but have different turns and twists.
That's beautiful. What I'm hearing from you is, as children, we experience trauma, we feel unsafe, whatever it might be. And then as a result, we have these adaptive strategies. And those adaptive strategies move us further and further and further away from the authenticity of our being, of our, you could say, soul blueprints. And what I'm hearing from you is that is when these symptoms of mental illness start expressing themselves. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And then you said it perfectly, symptoms, right? The symptomology is really a thread on a sweater, but we're all wearing the sweater and we can all decide if it's the right fit or not. But yet what happens is people want to clip the thread. They want to address the symptom. And this goes for all branches of development, whether it's mental, spiritual, physical, emotional, even financial. The itch or the thread that's loose is really a clue that points us into what's really going on underneath the surface. And everything underneath the surface, a good analogy would be this. You know, when we're kids and we held a beach ball in the pool, and you'd like get down there and hold, you can only hold the ball for so long. Eventually the ball has to pop up to the top of the surface. Well, we are the pool and our emotions are the ball. And so to the degree that we can release emotion or energy in motion, then we don't have to have so many adaptive coping strategies to which you speak of, because we can really lead life with an open heart and a grounded being and experience emotions that are intense, that can sideline us for a while, but we can become resilient, much like a bamboo reed or a strong tree, where if there's a storm, it bends, but it doesn't break. And I think for many people, when there's a break, that's actually the most beautiful moment in their life. Doesn't feel like it, but when we're broken, we're not actually broken. We are being forced to look at a part of the self that's not been integrated. And I think there's real beauty there. It doesn't mean it's always going to be clean. It actually is most times really messy. But there's real gems there.
Yeah. And one of the words that you're using is parts of self. So, you know, I'm a big fan of parts work. I'm curious, has that been a part of your healing journey in terms of working with the self as a multiplicity, as a collection of some of these different parts playing different roles, some of which have not been fully integrated?
It's a yes and. I interviewed Dick Schwartz, the founder of IFS, and he actually did a live session on my podcast, and I had a huge release. And, this concept of IFS is fascinating, right? We have the firefighters that cover for the protectors, but essentially we all have this part of a psyche that is in exile. In his work, No Bad Parts, he talks about the exile. And I think really the exile is the one that doesn't get enough attention in most work because, like you said, symptomological wise, there's such a focus on the firefighter or the protector.
Yeah.
Even some parts of CBT therapy and many branches of talk therapy, they're talking about the behavior or the action. But I actually think it's much deeper. I think it's much deeper, and it's been an evolution of understanding, Greg, where, I went through talk therapy. I did plant medicine and breath work and float tanks and microdosing and inner child work and IFS and just this kind of graduated experience where, quite frankly, recently in the past couple of months, I did some very deep work with a gentleman called Mark Wolin, and he wrote a book called It Didn't Start With You, about intergenerational healing. And in the sessions I've been able to sit with him, it's been profound because he and all of my other mentors, I'm up to 850 episodes now. And you know what the through line is, Greg, at the crux of your question that every guest that sits across the table has encountered? It's this one deep question of, am I abandoning a part of myself when I feel afraid? And what is the cost when I abandon a part of myself that my life is bared fruit by? In other words, the quality of my life is dictated by the authenticity of my being. Because when I'm authentic, I'm at peace. I can be Josh. Yet these parts of self, they're very subtle at times. We've heard the phrase maybe the ego is a subtle foe. The ego sometimes can be a snake or a whisper or sometimes a sledgehammer. But typically the ego has one language, and it's the language of fear. False evidence appearing real or for everyone's attention responsibly. I like that one because a lot of times just because something might be consciously false does not mean that unconsciously or somatically that it feels false. Many times these emotions or these beliefs that are locked into our tissues or into our unconscious mind, depending on if you follow IFS or if you follow Bessel-van der Kolk, or even the smooth muscle theory and the latch theory from Michael Edward Johnson, they're all pointing to the same thing. And this is why I love podcasting, because we can go in so many branches of science and models, and we can ask ourselves, what's the through line? And I believe, Greg, that the through line is that at some point we abandon a part of ourselves. And most often it's the younger version of ourselves. For me, it was little Joshy. He didn't have the type of support that he needed, even though his parents did all the best that they possibly could with the level of consciousness they had in their development at that time. Sometimes our parents' consciousness isn't enough to make our neural system feel safe because our parents essentially do one thing. They reflect onto us a reality of safety or a reality of fear. And they do it based on what they were taught. So it's this epigenetic transfer that happens. If you look at the Native American theory, they call it the 7th generation principle. 7 generations back and forward are healed when we integrate all parts of self. I do believe it's that one through line, though, of us learning that when we abandon our inner child, when we abandon that young version of self, we may feel safe for a while, but the exile is still in the closet, banging on the door, asking to be held. And that exile will operate in projection, in relationship, in business, in quiet moments, in friendship, and in literally all parts of life, because it's asking for peace. It's asking for integration. And so that's the through line that I've seen over the past 11 years in all these podcasts is, can we exhale and be in peace or be in union with the part of ourselves that we've abandoned, that we've rejected? And a lot of times that part that we've abandoned and rejected was a learned behavior because we saw our parents do it.
Beautiful. What it was bringing up for me as you were sharing is something that Gabor Mate talks about, which is the dilemma between authenticity and attachment, and how we forego authenticity to secure attachment, which is a form of self-abandonment.
Yeah.
And so I guess the healing journey is as we're healing those attachment wounds and we're securing more internal attachments, then we can return to our authentic self. I would love to dive into emotional epigenetics. As soon as you said that term, something lit up inside of me and said, we need to go into that a little bit.
Mm.
So, what is emotional epigenetics?
The way I understand it now, which it's always evolving, but the basic definition is that the epigenome sits on top of the genome. And so our genome is fixed, but our epigenome are essentially dials that turn up the volume or down the volume on a gene's expression. And so knowing the scientific model, I really have a hypothesis that I'm going deeper into. And that hypothesis is that when we understand the science and the spirituality of why some people heal and some don't, we find that emotions, unconscious beliefs, and environmental expression are passed down through lineage. That's the top level of emotional epigenetics.
And I'm a big fan of Mark Wolin's work. I love his book, It Didn't Start With You. I come from a family of Holocaust survivors, so his work really hit home for me.
Oh, yeah.
And so I've
Yeah.
done a lot of work. Also, I did a year of training in family constellation, which I know he does a lot of constellation work.
Yes.
So this has all been very real for me. And so with this, you could say intergenerational transfer. How have you noticed that show up in your life? And how have you been able to begin identifying, wait a minute, this pattern didn't start with me? Because there's been a lot of times in my life where I'll play something out or I'll act something out. I'm like, wait a minute, that so resembles how I experienced my father. Or that so resembles a dynamic that I experienced in my original constellation. And even replicating the constellation from our family of origin with other people, other partners, other relationships. So I'm really curious what your experience of all of this has been, because it's such a huge but probably underexplored topic.
Ever since I was a little boy, I felt this hot air bubble in my stomach, and I couldn't figure it out why. And like I said, in my healing journey, I listed out a bunch of practices and modalities that I did. Breathwork was a very significant one, where I was actually able to start sensing what was in that hot air bubble. But how I learned about Mark Wolin's work was actually through a friend named Mark Groves. And Mark is a human connection specialist, and he nudged me in Wolin's area. And when I looked back, when I started to understand the models and the frameworks of It Didn't Start With You and intergenerational healing, I started to connect dots from my past about, literally, Greg, no exaggeration, every single relationship I'd ever been in, the way I treated my mother, my father, my brother, my friends, and most importantly, myself, were all a fabricated story based on a coping mechanism that I felt that I actually acted out because I saw my parents act their own out. Now, what I mean by this, I'll go a level deeper, is when I was born 4 pounds, 11 and a half ounces. And for the first 2 weeks of my life, I was in an incubator. So I was being hovered around by strangers. I don't know how much my mom or dad held me. And when I talk to them, they don't remember. Think about how incredibly, think about the necessity of human touch, especially mother to baby. Think about the importance of that we've been learning through science for so long. And then I reflect, okay, if my neural system was actually coming out of my mother's womb early, well, then obviously I didn't feel safe inside of my mother. I had to come out early. And then not only did I feel unsafe in the womb, in utero, I then was under a essentially hot plastic glass that was keeping me warm, kind of a pseudo comfort, but not the real thing. And I can look back on that and go, wow, that must have been so hard for this young baby, fetus then turning into a baby. And then I look at the ways in which my father left home right after I was born. My mom was struggling with manic bipolar disease at that time, still is. And then I graduate into school and being in the system, and I was bullied and overweight and chronic sinusitis and just the ramifications that actually started when I was inside the body of my mother. And then I started to look into the trauma language of my mother and going into Mark's work and relaying that to the past and thinking, okay, I'm going to go back and excavate, Greg, but I'm not going to go back and excavate to blame. I'm going to go back and excavate to know what happened, not why it happened.
Yeah.
This is the big question in my work and in the answer to your question of how has this unfolded for me? How it's unfolded for me is in the beginning of my journey, I was doing it all wrong. I was excavating the past to find why something happened and what meaning I can make as to why it occurred. And I'm going to be the one to heal my family. It's like that was actually the ego being subtle. That was me trying to hide away from the emotion that I was feeling, which was inherently grief and sadness. That's the hot air bubble. And so my journey has been starting out backwards and then remembering forwards. And so when I look at my mother and what she was struggling with, and then I go to my grandfather and my grandmother, who were the product of my great-grandparents who came over from Sicily and landed on an island and had a number written on their clothes. And then the great-greats who lived in Sicily during famine and wartime, and even World War II, we are the product of a very traumatic society. But our ancestors and our lineage did not have the luxury that you and I have now. This is an extremely luxurious moment that you and I have, and an extremely luxurious lifestyle for everybody listening. Like the fact that you're doing the healing work and that you're interested in this conversation is only because you have the capacity to do so. You don't have to be in the field working for 12 hours like our lineage did. So on a 30K view, what I'm really saying is when I looked back, and also when I looked at my father's side, the challenges he went through with rheumatoid arthritis, my dad's skin peeled off when he was in high school. My grandfather had shoes with holes in them walking through the fields in Wyoming. And I look back on maternal and paternal, and I can see the spider webs of all the emotional patterns, all the unconscious beliefs, and all the environmental expression that essentially what I like to call bioenergetically burdens people. When we're bioenergetically burdened with these unconscious beliefs, these emotional patterns, and these environmental expressions, we get burdened and we have to adapt. You cannot carry a backpack filled with 100 pounds of concrete without kind of postural subluxation, right? You have to adapt in order to carry the load or in order to carry the burden. And then I thought in our society now, what's really happening is we're coming to an awareness moment. We're coming to a high point of consciousness that does not rely on us stuffing down emotion anymore or ignoring what has happened. It's not important that I excavate for why. Why, I believe, is a fool's game. But what is very intelligent? Because when we can identify what happened, we can understand how we can integrate deeper parts of ourselves without abandoning them or rejecting them. Otherwise, if we don't, and this is the really sad part, until you make the unconscious conscious, it'll rule your life and you'll call it fate, which is what Jung said so eloquently in the early 1900s. What he's saying is emotional epigenetics. He's just saying it from his lens of psychoanalysis. And so I think about my role and my passion now, it's to bring lightness and also sacredness to the personal development realm. It's such a serious world, Greg, and levity and humor and lightness is needed so much in our healing. If we don't bring that, then we can get mentally stuck in the excavation. We can get mentally stuck in the mental models. And I speak from experience. That was my journey. Remember, I did it backwards. I went mental first. I went why first. And then I released that and I started to do the real deeper work that's very complicated and contextual of how do I love and integrate all parts of self such that I don't carry on this genetic expression and I don't give it to my children, because that's not theirs to carry. That's mine to heal. That's mine to integrate.
Beautiful. I was going to ask, how has becoming a father impacted your personal healing and then also your sense of purpose and mission in the world, because you're handing the world over to this next generation? So how has stepping into fatherhood really impacted those two areas?
The deepest impact for me has been on a continuous basis, realizing where I'm not free, where I'm still in the process of shedding the emotional patterns and unconscious beliefs, where I'm shedding the environmental expressions that exacerbate into physical symptomology. My children are the deepest, most crystal clear mirror into the truth of who I am. And of course, right next to that, my wife, she's a powerful mirror as well. And so, yeah, to the degree that I'm being present with my children, they're going to teach me so much more than all these books in my studio, because that is the ultimate report card. There, there, there is no greater report card on planet Earth than if your children and your spouse enjoy being around you. That ultimate report card. And then the final frontier is, do you love and enjoy being with yourself? And one could even say that that interchanges with all mirrors. So if there's 3 mirrors, self, children, and spouse, then all of those mirrors actually, I'm in the middle of them like a fun house, and they're all just kind of shining on me at all times. So I don't know if one comes before the other. I think our integration and our peace and our power comes from the viewpoint of all 3 of these mirrors that allow us to see who we really are. We could put a mirror of friendship in there as well. We could also put a mirror of business, and of how we get feedback from people that we do business with or our friendships. So I think those 5 mirrors are been very, very intense for me at times, but also very revealing and very joyous. Ultimately, my children teach me more than anything, and they bring me the greatest amount of joy.
Beautiful. I love what you mentioned about the mirrors, because what that creates is really radical self-responsibility
It feels radical.
and way less projection.
Right.
Beautiful. And
Yeah,
how
the
about
project.
yeah, good.
I was going to say the projection. The projection is a tricky one, because the most dangerous place to be is when someone says out loud, I'm fully healed. I'm projection free. That is that's like you're walking on thin ice there. Because that's when the ego is actually gearing up to project again. And so I'll leave that there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a good dose of
Yes.
humility in there.
Right. Yeah.
And how about your work, your mission, your purpose, like what you're here to do? Because when you step into fatherhood, you step into a new archetype. It's a very different archetypal landscape. Kind of like you could say maybe going from the warrior to the king,
Mm.
or any way you want to kind of frame it. But how has that archetypal shift impacted your sense of mission here?
The mission when I started, it was Wellness Force Radio. That was 2015.
Yeah.
And at that time, I had a pretty severe sex addiction, porn addiction. I think it's severe. And the reason I say that is because that was my ultimate coping strategy that my soul knew was no longer serving our evolution. But I chose the vehicle of podcasting to do self-work and self-growth in public, to consequently keep myself accountable. And in 2022, after 7 years, I shifted from Wellness Force Radio to Wellness and Wisdom, because I was done being forceful. I was done trying to force things. And as you know from Hawkins' work, Power versus Force, the only way we can really be powerful is from a place of embodied peace. Anytime I take something from you or I take something from anyone else by force, there's immediate resentment that's created. Now, that also applies to me. So if in my early entrepreneurial journey, I would force things. I would force productivity. I would force 12-hour days. I would force not going to sleep. I would force compulsory working hours. And it's because I was afraid. I was afraid of not being successful. I was afraid of failing. I was afraid of bankruptcy. So you can see that there again, my knowledge and wisdom were backwards. If I could put a note in my pocket in 2015, I would have told myself to focus primarily on the parts of myself that I've rejected. And I would have said to myself, and I think he would have listened. You know, sometimes you ask people that question, hey, if you can go back and ask your younger self one thing, do you think he would listen? I say absolutely. I think I would know how to talk to that 35-year-old version of Josh. And I do think he would listen, because the same pain he felt then carried on up until about 2024, 2025. It took another, Greg, solid 2 to 3 years for me to integrate the wisdom that was knocking on my door. So it's been a genuine evolution, and it has not been easy. I'm not going to powder cake it. It's been really, really challenging. So now the fuel source that I pull from has been, how can I be intelligent in the way that I do my work? And also, how can I be in union with this young part of Josh that needs rest, that needs recovery, that needs time with his children and intimacy with his wife? The only way that any of that comes is the ultimate paradox, because the part of myself that I was ignoring, that I was repressing, and that I was suppressing, you know, conscious and unconscious, was this young version of Josh that just wanted to know that I've got him, that I'm here for him, that no matter where we go or what we find ourselves in, that I'm going to listen to him, and I'm not going to silence him, and I'm not going to put him in a closet, and I'm going to let him know that I've got him and I've got us. That's the turning point. There is no PDF. There is no weekend workshop. And I would argue there's no one psychedelic ceremony that can get people to what I believe only happens through learned and lived experience. I don't think it has to be as long. That's part of my mission in the world, is to shorten that suffering curve, because I went through such a long one.
When you transition to wellness and wisdom, I'd love to unpack those two words a little bit. I'd love to start with wisdom, actually, because we have this world that's full of information, as much information as you can gather and consume in a moment's notice, but not a lot of wisdom.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information.
Oh, yeah.
How do you differentiate information, and you could say knowledge,
Sure.
from real wisdom?
Wow, such a deep question. If you don't mind, can I just share something that I had written down? Is that all right?
Please.
I love this, and then I'll answer personally after this.
Yeah.
This is an excerpt from a book called Outwitting the Devil, and it'll be a 60-second passage. He was interviewing the devil, which is essentially just his shadow, right? Outwitting the Devil, a very famous book. He said, "What is wisdom? Wisdom is the ability to relate yourself to nature's laws so as to make them serve you, and the ability to relate yourself to other people so to gain their harmonious, willing cooperation in helping to yield whatever you demand of it. Time is nature's seasoning experience, through which the human experience may be ripened into wisdom. People are not born with wisdom, but they are born with the capacity to think, and they may, through time, think their way into wisdom. Wisdom only comes through the lapse of time. It cannot be inherited, and it cannot be imported from one person to another, except through the lapse of time. Wisdom comes only to non-drifters who formed positive thought habits as a dominating force in their lives. Drifters and those whose dominating thoughts are negative never require wisdom except of a very elementary nature. Accumulated knowledge is not wisdom. If knowledge were wisdom, the achievements of science would not be converted into implements of destruction. What is needed to convert knowledge into wisdom? Time plus the desire for wisdom. Wisdom is never thrust upon one. It is acquired, if at all, by positive thinking through voluntary effort. The majority of people who acquire wisdom do so after they have passed the age of 40. Prior to that time, the majority of people are too busy gathering knowledge and organizing it into plans to spend any efforts seeking wisdom." And he ends with this: "Adversity and failure are nature's universal languages through which she impacts wisdom to those who are ready to receive it." Oh, I mean, that to me is the summation of all that I believe and all that I actually know. all that I actually know. Because when I think about true wisdom, it's the ability to know thyself and to have others cooperate with you in that harmonious law that he described. And I do resonate with adversity and failure and roadblocks being the seasoning that are afforded to somebody who's seeking wisdom if they're ready to receive it. I also remember reading a book from Rudolf Steiner, How to Know Higher Worlds. And he said in the beginning of that book that when a student has a pure heart, a pure intention in their heart to seek wisdom, then the master that holds that wisdom cannot not share it with them. They have to share it with the student, but only if the intention is pure. And I think those two passages I can repeat. They're not just regurgitations. They're recapitulations in my own life experience, because I have actually lived those passages. And I believe in those passages because that's been the topography of my journey. That's how it's unfolded for me.
Incredible. Incredible. I really also loved how in the passage he said that if knowledge was wisdom, then science wouldn't misuse it in the way that it has.
That's right.
Really, really beautiful.
Yeah. Look at all the wars that are started in this world under the clenched fist that their God is better than yours.
Yeah, or religion.
Look at science saying, stay 6 feet away from each other and put a bag on your face and you'll be safe. Look at all the ways in which science has become literally a god that people pray to, yet we have Fauci pleading the Fifth Amendment over 100 times when we all know he's a liar, even though he was exalted as a god of science. So I'm here to tell y'all, your god of science has failed you because you were the one that put it on the pulpit, because you outsourced in a coping mechanism your own safety and security to be a good little boy and good little girl. That's not wisdom.
Amen. You know, I was I think it was a week ago, actually. I was at a fire ceremony with, it was run by this organization up here in upstate New York that is connected to the Huichol tradition of northern Mexico, of fire keepers and medicine keepers.
Ooh.
And it was one of the first times where I felt like I was truly around elders. It was the first time that I really felt like I was truly around what we would call wise elders.
Mm.
And they sat there with so much joy, such a light heart, and so much delight in just sharing presence. And I could see like this look in their eyes of like, I really see you and I have this desire to really know you. And it was the first time that I actually felt in my body this full exhale of I could just be, I don't have to perform,
Ooh.
and there's nothing that I have to do to really earn their connection or earn their blessing or whatever it might be. How much that differed from my childhood. And I realized how much we're missing these wise elders in our modern worlds.
Yeah.
What has the impact of that been from your perspective? Whether it's our generation, current generations, what has the impact of not having the wise elders that maybe we once did in the past? Because that
When
goes
we
along
don't,
with the wisdom.
yeah. Ooh. I was looking across the podcast studio when you asked that question.
Uh,
And I have this super old school book over here. It's called Vitology. It was the album cover from Pearl Jam. I don't know if you've seen it. I think it was written in like 1904. And they were so certain that everything they wrote in that book was true. And actually, many of the things in that book were true. But you see, these people that write these books and these people that dedicate their lives to an elevation of consciousness or an understanding of the human condition, they inadvertently become elders, or they unconsciously become just information givers. And so I think in order for somebody to be a true elder, they have to balance the art of knowing themselves, knowing what they've learned, and knowing what the world most needs in the current moment they're teaching it. There are some elders that I've seen that speak as if they're an elder, but they're teaching things only from the past that don't necessarily relate to modernity, to where we are now. So I wanted to have that pre-frame before I really answer your question. The impact that I've seen is that many of us have a deep father wound that we will unconsciously seek out other wounded men who have the same father wound, and we'll get teachings from them because they're presenting themselves as an elder, but they're not truly an elder because they don't have an integration of all parts of themselves. But they're great at speaking, they're great at marketing, and with the rise of social media, they're great at clips and marketing and reels. Yet the best elders I've ever found could give a shit about marketing. They don't care. They know exactly who they are. They know the wisdom that they've learned from their past, and they know exactly what the world needs right now. And they're unapologetic and completely unabashed to sharing that wisdom to the students that have a pure heart, that have pureness of heart. And so I think it creates this bifurcation where when we have essentially a gaping Grand Canyon of the loss of eldership, it's because first and foremost, we've been trained to look for quick wins, quick information, and get rid of the pain we're feeling as fast as possible. And social media feeds this hungry ghost more and more and more. I just saw some research that we now officially as a society have less attention span than a goldfish. I think goldfish have 8 seconds and we have 7 seconds now. That's why on Instagram, you have to have so much pressure on hooks and marketing and visuals, is because people are doom scrolling. And even that phrase is interesting. They're doom scrolling because they feel like they're in doom. They feel an impending doom, and they're thinking that social media can be a coping strategy for them. A real elder comes into a space and flushes the slate clean of everything I've just described. Literally just their presence in a space is healing. Like you said, you were sitting at the fire and you just felt so seen. You felt like you could really exhale. A true elder comes into a space with no judgment, with no projections, and with pure, honest, lived experience. And then when they share that experience, it's so refreshing and it's so healing. And really, you know what it is? It's so transformative to the people that are in a space with a true elder, that then those elders finally get the attention and the respect they deserve. And so I think it's a very complex situation as to why true eldership is not being practiced in the scale that it used to be, is because I actually feel like it's all part of the plan. I think there's a very nefarious plan on earth to provide pseudo comfort, pseudo sexuality, pseudo wisdom, pseudo everything, pseudo being false or fake, like a hollow shell of something that could actually be. And I think that the way I've seen it play out is in the past, I used to seek out mentors that had a father wound. I used to seek out people like the David Goggins that are obviously so deeply wounded that they're preaching from that wound. And then when I started to do the deeper work on myself, and of course it goes without saying that I still have more work to do, as we all do. I'm not exempt from doing more work just because I'm at this stage of consciousness. Now the type of mentorship that I seek out is I ask myself 3 questions. Do I want the life that this elder has? Or do I want some part of their life? For example, if I'm seeking out physical nourishment, is this person physically nourished? Are they fit? Are they healthy? Are they well? If I'm seeking out emotional nourishment, do I look at the way in which this person processes emotion and their family enjoys being around them? If it's a spiritual nourishment, do I genuinely feel in my bones that this person has a direct relationship with their creator? And the same thing with mental. Do I feel that this person is mentally sharp? Or do they have acuity? Can they articulate their wisdom in a way that it's easy to understand? These are the ways in which I seek out mentorship, specifically eldership. And those are the questions that I ask myself But I think it's a real challenge to society that there's such a lack of true elders. And I do think it's by design, personally.
I don't doubt it. And just having that experience recently was just, it made things very, very clear in terms of where our culture is right now.
Yeah.
I'd love to shift over to the wellness side because we're living, from my perspective, in a world that, yes, there's processed food, there's, all these things, but there's also like the world of biohacking, there's the world of, functional medicine, which, is beautiful, but also sometimes can be a little mechanical. Um, and I've fallen into the trap recently. Something I've been exploring in myself is like I eat well, I exercise, I meditate, I, sauna, all the things. But it was coming from this energy of like micromanagement.
Yeah.
And I was just recently exploring this within myself, and I realized how much in this micromanaging energy of my wellness, I wasn't really listening and attuning. And so it's been a practice for me to really restructure my relationship with my body, my relationship with wellness, really listening and attuning more, less of like this micromanaging energy, which, funny enough, given a lot of our conversation, goes back to a lot of the energy of my mother that I experienced as a child. You
Mm.
could say like the loving but smothering or loving
Yeah.
but micromanaging. I was like, oh, I actually internalized that and started to manage my body and my health in the same way.
Wow.
And so I'm really curious, how do you define wellness and how has that evolved over the years for yourself?
Yeah. I'll give two definitions. There's one definition that is holistic and scientific, and then there's one that's deeply personal to me.
Great.
So the holistic scientific of wellness is that when you understand how to nourish all parts of yourself, and that understanding turns into wisdom, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and financial nourishment of self, is ultimately the stasis of wellness. I believe it's the nourishment of those five sides, and those are both scientific and spiritual. But on a personal note, I think that ultimately wellness for me is when I am focused on the we instead of just the I.
Mm.
Think about the word illness. It starts with I. When I'm so focused on my victim stories and my life being against me, and he did this to me, me, that promotes illness. When I start bridging out and I start remembering that, oh, wellness is actually both singular and collective. Wellness is deeply personal, but wellness is collective. Then it gets to the real, ultimately highest form of wellness, which is that I've integrated all the parts of myself that allow me to show up authentically. And when I celebrate my authentic self, it gives permission for people to do the same. That's wellness. Now, the complexity there is vast because, as you know, just because I'm nourishing these five parts of self, my bills don't stop, my responsibilities don't stop, and my projections and my work and my attunement to those and my awareness of those don't stop either. And also throw in children, right? And friendships and personal goals and business. Like, there's a lot that we carry in this world. And so I do not believe that it's possible to be well unless we make wellness a passion and a hobby and something that we love learning about and saturating ourselves in. The moment that we get pulled out of, I'll just say this word, like being a nerd. I'm a nerd. Like I really nerd out on things, like whether it's the brain or the body or emotions. I like to know all the moving parts. So I'm a dork. I'm a nerd. And I like celebrate that. I think it's a great part of being passionate. Look at all the nerds that have created all the things, like these phones that we all carry. Those were created by nerds, y'all. Those were definitely created by nerds. And so the things that we most value, we become passionate about. And unless we are really passionate and we have a hobby and we saturate ourselves, in understanding our own wellness and exploring our own wellness, then our attention is currency, and we're going to spend that currency on television or porn or shopping or unhealthy food or unhealthy people or current events or news. And society is just sitting there, licking its chops, ready to monetize our pain whenever it can. Oh, you don't like your body? Do this GLP-1. Oh, you think you're ugly? Get a facelift. Oh, you think you're still ugly? Get liposuction. It's like, it never ends. It fucking never ends. The hooks of modernity that are sitting there drooling, waiting to monetize our insecurities and essentially our lack of authenticity in ourselves.
Incredible. Beautiful. A couple of things that really landed for me was when you were talking about the nerd. I love that. And one of the things I really value, and it comes off so much on your podcast when you're interviewing, is the depth of curiosity that you have. And for me, curiosity is one of the most important energies because it keeps you open to possibility.
Yeah.
It keeps you adaptive to change. And it's, you could say, the opposite of certainty.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, like, certainty is death. Like you were saying, like the guy that's like, yeah, I'm fully healed, I have no more projections. Like, that's certainty. That's dangerous.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
But curiosity of
Yeah.
like, oh, I wonder if I'm still doing that. Curiosity really keeps you energetically open. And so I really
Yeah.
appreciated that.
Yeah. I don't know the etymology or the exact definition of curiosity, but I had some friends over this morning and I was reflecting back to biblical times when Jesus would give a speech, he would sit the children right in the front of the sermon. And he would tell everyone, you can only receive what I'm sharing and this wisdom if you have the heart and mind of a child. I don't mean that you're not mature. I don't mean that you need to be reckless. But think about children. Like when I read, oh my gosh, Greg, when I read to my children and I just happen to glance over at them, they are so present. They're like reading this book. They're imagining. It's like, it's one of the most beautiful things. It's so beautiful. Like it honestly brings up emotion in me just to talk about it. I was just reading to him last night and I'm like, wow, like the heart and the mind of a child is so open. Kids 0 through 7, the neurology is basically on drugs, right? The hemispheres are open. There's a bunch of neurogenesis happening at all times. I think it's like, I don't know the exact figures, but it's somewhere around 1 million new neurokinetics happening every day. And so these children are such great teachers because they bring us back to inherently the core of what you said, which is curiosity. The curious heart is one that's just there for the observation and for the learning. The certain heart is one that is fixed on knowing the outcome and having a crystal ball of some sort. And I don't think that it's really possible to live a really beautiful life without genuinely practicing curiosity as a skill set. I think it's a skill set. Everything we've talked about today are skills.
Yeah.
And these skills, just like, you put a barbell on your back, it's all the same. It's the repetitions that you do it in that yields the result. That's what I believe.
Yeah. I also love how you talked about the I versus the we. The less healthy we are, the more self-focused we become. Especially like if that autonomic nervous system's in survival, it's always my survival. It's always, fight or flight. It's me. The healthier we get, the more we expand out into the interconnection. What's interesting is the word wellness has the we in it, and the word illness has the I in it.
I know.
So
It's
cool.
so interesting.
So
And
cool.
you know what? I interviewed this guy named Nir Eyal recently, and he held up his book. It's called Beyond Beliefs. And he's like, look, the word lie is inside of belief. I found that fascinating because I'm like, oh, beliefs are just a story. They're just a story that we tell ourselves. So if I grew up in an environment where I was told lies to believe in, well, then those lies become pseudo truth as an adult. And then my quote beliefs are essentially just packets of information that I've attached to as a coping strategy for what my soul knows is a lie, but what my conscious mind is acting out through a mask.
Yeah. And beliefs always feel like they need to be defended.
Of course.
Truth never needs to be defended.
You know what's interesting about what you said? And this goes for people in religion, people that have dogmatic views about anything. The best way to believe, somebody's belief is embodied and they have a true connection to their belief when they can state their belief and they're not triggered and they don't try to change someone else's.
Absolutely.
That's when somebody has a real embodied belief that, like, for example, I hold a belief that men are men and women are women. And to some people, that's really triggering. And I'm like, okay, well, triggering to these people. It's because they want me to believe what they believe. They want me to believe their beliefs as if they were mine. But it's the ultimate paradox of the ego. Because if you think about it, if you have somebody that was born a man and they went through trauma and now they think they're a woman, and I refuse to speak to someone as if they're a woman because they're not, it brings up anger in them. Why won't you believe what I believe? Well, I'm happy to allow you to have your belief without telling you you're wrong. I'm happy to have my belief without you telling me that I'm wrong. But if your belief rests upon me believing as you believe, then what are we really talking about here?
Yeah.
It's not actually belief. It's a packet of information that was accumulated through, I believe in many cases, trauma. And that trauma projecting out with anger and with forcefulness that if I don't believe what you believe, then somehow I'm a victim. Or I'm sorry, then somehow I'm a villain and they're a victim. It's essentially the basics of the drama triangle, right?
Yeah.
The victim, the villain, and the hero. It's Stephen Cartman's work from the early 60s. And also I just interviewed a beautiful woman inside and out. Her name's Kylie Ryan. And she has a heart alchemy model that she describes. And she goes deep into this work as well. That's a whole nother podcast, right? The drama triangle. All of this stuff is happening because Christ consciousness is at the center of it. And I believe that Christ consciousness would say, hey, if that belief makes you truly happy, which I would argue that it doesn't, then by all means, live your life and you will not receive any judgment from me. But if you demand with a clenched fist that I believe exactly what you believe and you make me a villain just because I don't believe what you believe, one has to then wonder, am I creating a victimhood vibration for myself?
Yeah. To me, anyone that, and I've seen this in myself in the past, anyone that needs to defend a belief is living on very shaky ground,
Very.
very unstable ground. Someone who's really rooted in truth, there's nothing really to defend, And I feel like, because I've explored a lot of this internally, where my desire to defend belief is really my unconscious desire to belong. And in a very mind-oriented culture, belief is where we find belonging.
Absolutely.
And that goes back to that, core wound, the trauma.
Dude, you remember that show Brain Games with Jason Silva?
Yeah.
It was on Discovery Channel.
Yeah.
There was one episode where he went into the neurology. We have this certain part of our brain that is wired for acceptance from tribe. And we haven't really evolved that much from millennia, right? Like we're still wired for tribe. We're still wired for acceptance. I have this phrase that I've been milling on for a while, and it relates to emotional epigenetics. And I wonder how you feel about it. The belief that I have is that true freedom is the result of when your biology and your reality are no longer at war. Your biology, who you are, and your reality, who you think you are one and the same. And then you can be free. Then you don't have to abandon yourself. You don't have to eat terrible food. You don't have to have any coping strategies at all. I think really what it could be described as simply as there is this part of our biology that craves that tribal connection, tribalism. But we can actually transcend our biology with our mind and with our consciousness. We can transcend it. I genuinely, wholeheartedly believe that we can transcend that part of our brain. Because if you think about it, all the people that created magical, amazing things, they've all been outliers. They've all been ostracized. It's like we've heard that the truth goes through 3 stages. First, it's rejected. Then it's accepted by few. Then it's wholeheartedly regarded as the truth. Well, the people that have the courage to be completely rejected are the ones that shift consciousness and reality, not just for themselves, but for all. And those are the people that endure the suffering to be able to have their ideas and their reality brought forth. And then we see people like Bruce Lipton or Joe Dispenza or Paul Chek or Greg Schmaus or Josh Trent. Like, we're all doing our best to project a reality that we believe is most loving and most authentic. And then we learn who we are in the process of it. We learn if we can take the bludgeoning. We learn if we can take these burdens. I remember I saw a clip of Paul on stage once. I think he was accepting an award and he started bursting in tears. He's like, it's been such a long road to get here. And I could feel his sincerity. I could feel how much he's been through to be able to get there. And I think for many people that are change makers, the path is not easy. They're going to face those 3 stages of truth. And a lot of that is around shifting beliefs, and not just in themselves, but in everyone that they're sharing it with. And that's really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. The last stop I'd love to take on this beautiful journey together is what you called the liberation loop.
Yes.
Incredible term, which I'd love to hear more about, because it seems paradoxical, because a loop seems like something that you get stuck in.
Sure.
And liberation is something you free yourself from. So please share with us this liberation loop.
All right. Well, think of it like this. I'll set the frame. Before being, right, which is identity, there's knowing. And the difference between knowing and being is trust and faith. Well, how is trust and faith built? It's built by evidence. So if you want to have a new life, if you want to have a new identity, you have to first go into the depths of yourself and know and believe in who you actually are. And then one must go out into the world and create evidence that is a reflection and their own projection of the love and of the integration that they feel in themselves. So that's the frame for what I'm about to share. The liberation loop is essentially in a previous model that I upgraded it. And before it was the BTFA model. Belief, which turns into thought, which then goes into feeling, and then creates outcome or action, BTFA. And the more that I worked with this model, I thought, okay, if I'm triggered, if I'm in a life that I don't love, if I'm in a body that I don't accept, if something in my life is going not how I want it to go, how do I get out of this? I built it for myself. Because now granted, it's a mental model, but I'll get into the emotion as we go through. So BTFA, belief, thought, feeling, action. What does this actually mean? Well, let's run it in reverse. I find it so funny, Greg, that I've shared with you on this podcast that I start things many times in my life backwards, and then I live them forward and remember. Well, the BTFA is the same. The way you get to healing and the way you can have the liberation loop serve you is actually by running the BTFA in reverse. So it's AFTB, right? Start like this. I'll just do a practical example and I'll make it personal so we all can understand. If I have an action, let's just say in my past, right? I had an action of using pornography, right? That action I can trace back. Okay, BTFA. All right. So then what is the feeling that I'm experiencing that created that action? Well, the feeling I'm experiencing is a hot air bubble in my stomach. I feel alone. I feel sad. I feel grief. All right, let me be with that for a moment. Now let's run the mechanism. What was the thought that came before that feeling? Well, the thought was, nobody's going to be there for me. I'm all alone. What does it matter anyway? But really, if we trace it deep down, right? BTFA, AFTB, now we're at the B, which is the most important part. This is where the difference between knowing and being really happens. If we really can jot this down, and I recommend that people do it actually with a pen and paper. There's something neurophysiology wise that it's really beautiful when you actually write with a pen. You can also do it with an app, or you can do it on the computer. Either way, you're going to get there. When you get to the B, if you're really honest with oneself, and I remember doing this in the past, the belief was, well, it doesn't matter anyway. It doesn't matter anyway, because relationships don't work out. And this is all a big one for me. Well, this is all that I'm worthy of. These beliefs are so low density, so low frequency. On the Hawkins scale, these beliefs are grief and shame being 20. The lowest vibrational beliefs that we can have about oneself. Lowest vibrational states, but create the state, right? BTFA, AFTB. When I really got down to it and looking at the beliefs, then I actually did the secondary. And the secondary was, okay, is this true? And I got this from Byron Katie, but I also got this from Ariel, and I got this from Charles Duhigg, and I got this from BJ Fogg. They all use this self-introspection inquiry. And it was, okay, is this belief 100% true? Okay, it's actually not 100% true. Okay, can you know 100% that this belief is true? Well, not really. I mean, it happens all the time, but okay. All right, cool. If you know that this belief isn't true, and you also know that this belief isn't 100% true, who would you be? What freedom would be created without this belief? Oh my God. Well, like even I can feel the exhale now. Wow. If I know that these beliefs that I'm holding aren't actually true, and they're just lies that were packets of information that have been epigenetically expressed in my psyche, then I can say, okay, cool. What will be possible? I could go on a dating app. I could go talk to that cute person at the coffee shop. I could go, for me now, I can go to my wife and give her a hug. I can go play with my children. Great. Now, turn it around. What is it about you that actually believes that the results of your life, like let's say you're angry at your wife, you're angry at the pornography, you're angry at these things, turn it around on yourself. Oh, I'm the one that actually is projecting out the belief that life isn't worthy, that it's going to break anyways, that people can't be trusted, that I'm all alone. Wow. Well, what kind of a person would I have to actually reconcile with when I get to that point of turning it around on myself to then take, as you said before, radical responsibility of taking action, that my new belief of I am worthy, I am loved, I can go create the thing that I want. I don't actually need a screen at all. Then it breaks down into the new paradigm. And the new paradigm is the new belief times trust, times faith, times action. Because when you have a new belief, the new belief is great. Like we've all felt this, right, Greg? I want to make sure I understood that I have the audience understanding the loop, right? It's not a loop that you get stuck in. It's a loop that you get unstuck out of. That's what the liberation loop is for. It's for using the BTFA and the FATB to go deep into slowing your mind down, turning down the volume on your reticular activating system, turning down the volume on the amygdala response, and getting into the truth of introspection. Then once you go BTFA, AFTB, then you start doing your new belief set, which is called the secondary loop. Then you go into belief, trust, faith, and action. I believe at the end of that is freedom. At the end of that is liberation. But here's the kicker, and this is where most people, and even myself, even to this day, I still get lost in it. That's why it's a practice, man. Just because I create this model doesn't mean that I'm perfect in the way that I embody it 24/7, 365. Am I a lot better? And am I like really in black belt status? I would say, yeah. Like non-egoically, I'm in a black belt status, but I still use the loop because I need it. Here's the thing to look out for. This model can change your life. It really can. But what you have to look out for is when you form the new belief and you've done the work to get to this beautiful belief, one has to have trust in themselves that they can go out and have faith in action. You have to go out. You have to go out and you have to seek out the evidence that the new belief you've created is real. Otherwise, those neuroplastics aren't going to shift, right? Think about our beliefs as if you and I were walking in a field and there was the same track in a field where people always walk this way. changing a new belief is hard.
Yeah.
Because you might get super inspired. You might have a psychedelic journey. You might go to Tony Robbins. You might listen to Greg's podcast and you're like, I'm changing my life today. I've done my liberation loop. I have this new belief. Guess what's going to happen? The inertia of the old identity is going to come full front and center the next time that an attachment style or an archetype or some kind of wound makes itself clear. Then that's when you really start multiplying the trust in yourself, the faith in your creator, and the actions that are predicated on that new belief. So an example for me might be like, I'm going to journal about how beautiful real intimacy is. I'm going to journal about how fun it is to joke with my wife. I'm going to be saturated in collecting all this new evidence for this new belief. And I'm going to fortify my mind such that I no longer walk on that trodden path in the field. Now I walk the new path that I've actually carved out myself. That's how neuroplastics work. We have, and interrupt me if I'm going too deep here, but this is a deep question you're asking. This is a fundamentally, I think this is the deepest work we can do on planet Earth. And everyone's got their model. This works for me. And if it resonates for you, great. And if it doesn't, find the model that works for you. This model has worked for me and many people. When you go in the field and when you start carving out your new path, guess what's going to happen? You're going to get sticker burrs. You might step on a snake. There's going to be all kinds of stuff that wants to, the inertia of the past identity is going to fight against the new identity, such that it's going to test your resolve about how much you love yourself and how much you're committed to creating this new belief. And I'll say it really clearly, based on the evidence that you consciously go out and retrieve. That's it. That's really it. And this is the part of personal development or positive thinking that isn't talked about. And hasn't been a real deep framework that I've seen that allows people to start going through the challenging process, Greg, of forming a new identity. But without that foundation first of the liberation loop, you could positive think all day. You could look in the mirror and say you love yourself. If you haven't done the deep soul inventory first, then I don't think it's possible to go out and collect the new evidence, because you're going to collect evidence that has nothing to do with the new belief. You're going to collect evidence for the old belief. That's the liberation loop.
I fucking love it. Fucking love it. Is this a program that you're offering?
It's a program that I'll offer in the future.
Okay.
Right now, I'm actually honoring my own process of coming out of the descent and spending the next 3 months cultivating the curriculum and getting it to a place where it can really be for everyone. Because I think the shared journey, the universal human journey of suffering and pain is fundamental to us all. And I think that change is a really big process. When we turn a battleship, sometimes it takes a long time to turn a battleship around. And the only way we do it is through tools. And the one thing I'll say is that tools are nothing without community. You get wounded and you get traumatized in relationship. So the way the pain comes in is the way the pain comes out. You only heal in relationship or in community as well. So community is the perfect place to fortify and practice the individual learnings and tools, because then you'll get reflections about your projection and your community will mirror back to you if they feel embodied in you this new belief that you've created or not. Or they'll challenge you to go through the BTFA AFTB and then the secondary process. I haven't seen it personally. I think that a lot of people, even when people go to psychedelic ceremonies, they're still being either facilitated or they're being housed in a setting with other people. Community is 2 or more, right? Where we communicate in unity. And I think that's a real missing piece that also has to be part of the liberation loop, or honestly, any model that resonates for anyone.
Beautiful. Josh, thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for, one thing I want to share is, one of the things I really appreciate is how, obviously you've interviewed so many people. You've had the opportunity to connect with some of the most brilliant minds and hearts on this planet. But I see this, I think the word that you used most over the last hour plus of our time together is integration.
Mm.
And I could see, feel, and hear the integration that you've done and how the wisdom that you speak is really a result of the integrated self. And I just have deep appreciation for that. And so, if people want to learn more about your work, um, hear about what you're up to, any of your offerings, where would you like to send our listeners?
Well, first of all, man, thank you for sharing that. And I'm wise enough to know that I still have integration to do. So I receive with total open heart and gratitude your blessing. Also, you can only see that because you've integrated so much of yourself as well.
Mm.
So I'll say that. But I have created a space that's safe, and it's not a monetized space. It's just a space that's free. But um, I've created what I call, and it's not going to be a surprise to you because I think we all need these blueprints. So I've created the self-liberation blueprint. It's over at liberatedlife.com. And in this free community and free training, you can find over 30 videos going very deep into these topics. And the reason I have it free, at least for now, is because I'm using it as a testing ground to figure out how I can support people in the way that they most need the support. And so for a limited time, y'all can go there. It's free. The community's free. We have a lot of people that are getting exceptional results. There's breath work involved. There's self-inquiry involved. There's deep teachings involved. So head over to liberatedlife.com.
Beautiful. Josh, thanks for coming on the show, brother.
Thanks for having me. This was super, super nourishing and fun.